Hello.
Hi, everyone. Hi,
we're-
DGA Theater.
We're both named Daniel. We had nothing to do with that movie except we liked it a lot. And now we're welcoming to the stage someone who had everything to do with this movie, Mr. Christopher Nolan.
Thank you.
How many people is this their second time watching this movie? You could rewatch. Okay, great, amazing.
No, first time.
First
Raise
time.
your hand.
First
That's
time.
more.
Oh,
welcome.
amazing.
You just came off a real wild ride.
Me and Daniel just rewatched this breathtaking movie for the second time this week, and I have to say it is even better the second time. So if this is your first time, go watch it. I caught so many things. It's amazing. So Chris, this we just have to say this out loud. This is very surreal for us to be interviewing you here. I feel like we've stolen so many things from you over the years, and this is sort of like a fun opportunity for us to steal even more.
Yeah, we just steal from you and add butt jokes.
Exactly.
And that's like
that's our secret.
That's what our work is like.
I kind of want to start with just a very nerdy question. This is a DJ, screening, so I hope you want to nerd out with us. When I watch your films, the thing that I think stands out above everything else is the just the structure that you are constantly playing with. There's like a magic trick that you do where the themes and the characters and the story are always feeding into the structure, and vice versa, the structure's feeding back in the story. And it's something that we are always aspiring to do. And I'm just curious for Oppenheimer, what was it about this character and this story, and potentially, the structure that kind of inspired this movie? Like what kind of supercharged or kind of ignited the inspiration for this film?
Well, firstly, just to say that when the Daniels say that something feels surreal, you take it. I take that seriously, but no. For me, structure is always somehow related to point of view. So, as I'm with any project, as I'm getting into how we're going to make it, how we're going to tell the story, and for me as a writer director at script stage, I'm really thinking about how best to get the point of view that I'm looking for. In the case of Oppenheimer, when I read American Prometheus, this fantastic book by Kai Bird and Martin Sherwin, 25 years of research, Pulitzer Prize winning book, I had so much to draw from. But as I was reading it, I felt like the way that I wanted to tell the story, the way that I could see telling the story, was to adopt a first-person approach. And I actually wrote the script in the first person. So the stage directions, I this, I that. I wanted to jump into his head. But I needed a structure that would reinforce that. And so cross-cutting, braiding together a very intensely subjective telling of his story, where the camera's always with him, close to him, looking over his shoulder, very much in his face, looking at other people from across the room. And then an objective view, where we're seeing him more from other people's point of view, in particular Louis Strauss' point of view. And so in those black and white sequences, the camera is always closer to Robert Downey Jr. It's always, it's really the mirror of the color sequences, but from Strauss's point of view. And that's really where the structure developed from, is about point of view.
Was that like early on? Did you figure out like, oh, it's gonna jump with Strauss? Like, or was it like kind of late in the process that you're like, I need to do this?
No, it was early on, and my very first film, which is a 16 millimeter black and white film called Following. Thank you. I knew the structure I wanted to adopt for it, but I thought that the clever way to write it would be to write it chronologically and then cut it together. Literally back then it was probably scissors and, typing paper or whatever. But that involved so much rewriting to make it flow as a film that, people could engage with and watch, that I realized that structure has to come first for me, even before I write the script. And so ever since then, from Memento onwards, whatever structure I'm adopting, I have to know that before I actually put the words on the page, so that I can write the way the audience is going to see the film. Because when we get on the floor and we shoot the film, we're shooting in whatever crazy order. You're never able to shoot exactly the way you'd want to. You're very rarely able to shoot chronologically in any way. So for me as a writer, director, it's very important to start from page 1 and then work my way through to page 124, in this case 180 something, and experience it the way the audience is going to experience it, the way I want them to experience it.
Okay, that leads to my thought watching this again this week. How close is the script to this? Like how much do you like to play around in the edit? Do you like to collect additional material? Because like watching it, I just can't believe that it was written like this. And we try to write really close to what we want, but we still are like, I need some extra ingredients in the edit room, and the stuff you and your editor did is so inventive. I don't know. I'm just curious what that process was like.
Well, that's a tough question to answer. In fact, maybe the way to answer is say one of the sweetest things anyone's ever said to me was Hoyte van Hoytema, the director of photography on this, who just in the trenches with figuring out how to shoot this with IMAX film, how to do, we had to shoot in 57 days and with single camera IMAX, all of that. And so we're in the trenches together, battling it through on set, with the whole team as you are. And then looking at dailies, and then we're showing him the trailers as we're cutting them. And we're showing the film the first time, and he's in it and sort of asking me questions about it. And then I think the second or third time I showed him the film, he came out and he was like, wow, you had all this figured out already, didn't you? But you really let us feel that we got to invent it. And if you know Hoyte, it was this wonderfully self-deprecating thing because, of course, he is one of the key creative forces behind the film. But what he was suddenly sort of realizing was, that is the script that he'd read. But of course, scripts are just the bare bones. They're just the skeleton. And it's when it's what you go out with. I try to be as specific as possible so that we have a skeleton or foundation that's as solid as possible. But to answer the question specifically, if you look at the Trinity test, the build up to the Trinity test with the preparation of the bomb, for example, I, as a responsible director and producer on the film, whatever, I said to Ruth de Jong, the designer, Scott Fisher, special effects, who was also manufacturing some of the props, I'm like, I don't need you to build every aspect of the bomb. We'll do it very roughly, just what's in the script, whatever. And they, being great professionals, kind of went, yeah, but it's our names on this film. We're going to build this. This is going to be a definitive portrayal of this for a lot of people. So they built way more than I'd asked for. And they built the whole bomb. And of course, when I saw that, and I saw the bits of tape on it and things like that, that were absolutely accurate to the research, I then am like, great, I hope it didn't cost too much. But now that we have that, we're going to shoot all that stuff. Yeah. So the truck coming up, and then Jen Lane, my incredible editor, it's like, yeah, in the script, this is 2 lines, but we have 4 hours of process that we've shot like a documentary because they set up this tent underneath the gadget went in there, and then they started putting the pill, as they call it, the plutonium core, and then all of the lenses, the explosive lenses, and they built all of this stuff. So we shot all of it, and then up the top of the tower. And then whatever seemed the most vital in the edit, that's where we get to play. That's where the script is just a jumping off point. And, you get to play with what one filmmaker I showed the film to early on was like, yeah, you're dealing in montage. And that's something that cinema can do that nothing else, no other medium could do. And so that becomes the great strength of the medium that you're able to use to get all of this material in as short a time as possible. And so things like, Ruth came to me one day and she's like, okay, when we just found out that when they hoisted the gadget up the tower, they put mattresses underneath it just in case it would fall. And I'm like, that's insane.
That's in the movie. I remember seeing that, yeah.
So we're like, we absolutely have to do that in the film. We have to, because it just says everything about how much they were making this up as they went along, how scrappy this was with these scientists out in the desert, and the miracle, of scientific and engineering technology they were able to pull off, with obviously the awful implications of it. But that's how scrappy it was. Literally, they're thinking, and I'm not enough of a physicist to know whether a couple of mattresses would help if you dropped an atomic bomb from a tower. But
I think if you had enough
they
of
thought
them,
it was
yeah.
they thought it was worth doing. Yeah, it couldn't hurt exactly.
We were just talking earlier about the IMAX release, and you brought to our attention that this is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, IMAX releases ever. Is that correct?
I think it's the third biggest IMAX release in America or something. It was insane, but
Which-
like after Avatar and Star Wars.
Exactly. Which, like, I always ask. We always ask ourselves this question whenever we set out to do a movie. Like, what are some of the biggest hurdles we are putting in front of ourselves so that we can really be aware of it? And you set out to make a IMAX film that was mostly people talking in a room. You know, it's a historical drama. Half of it's black and white. It's the opposite of what you imagine an IMAX movie would be. What kind of conversations or internal kind of thought processes did you have in order to kind of bust through that obstacle and basically make a movie that was massively successful despite all of those kind of perceived obstacles?
Well, I think it's where the medium itself and the reason we all love to make films, it's like what drives that desire? What is it about making images and putting images together that gets us all so passionate about watching films and about making films? And films can be anything, and that screen can be anything. It could be a massive macro close-up, or it can be a huge wide vista shot. And we've been working with IMAX. I've been working with IMAX since The Dark Knight, and one of the things I've found is some of the most interesting IMAX shots we would get would be, I mean, each of those films ends with these massive close-ups, usually of Michael Caine, and the camera sort of moving in on him. And it's a beautiful, it's the same frame size as medium format portrait photography. And so it actually lends itself really beautifully to shooting faces. And so with each film, we sort of, with Interstellar, which is the first film I did with Hoyter, where he was able to start hand-holding the camera and really being more intimate with it. With each one, we sort of got drawn more and more to that aspect of it. Yes, we were still shooting the big vistas, but really wanting to see how it can break down the barrier between the screen and the audience and kind of put us in people's space and in their personal space. And so it really was just a question of pushing harder and harder in that cinematic direction and just loving the medium and just exploring it the way we love.
Did you ever think it would be this big of a box office hit? Like it's so I've been trying to make sense of it myself, that like it's morally ambiguous. Like it's a long, like morally ambiguous movie about nuance where it doesn't condemn or celebrate a controversial, like so many controversial ideas, and it sold so many tickets. Like did you have a sales pitch to people like I believe it's going to sell and here's why, or do you have I don't know, what's your takeaway from it all?
My takeaway is when you make a film, I do approach films from a practical point of view. So before we go to the studio, we have the script, we have the pitch, and we try and fit it into a practical box and say, okay, this is how we think this can work. And in the case of this film, not unlike what we had done with Dunkirk over at Warner's, but going to Universal, the big pitch was, we'll make this for half the money that anyone else would. And that's how but you've got to sell it like it's as big as everybody else's film. Because it's a big story, it's an important story, it's a potentially, really controversial and interesting thing to be wrestling with, and some serious material. And so we had to look back, and it was very difficult to come up with any kind of context. You had to go right back to like JFK, which I'd seen as a youngster, and been blown away by, the editing rhythms and we've made a film in a very different way, and hopefully with a little more historical accuracy, but I don't know when the last time you saw JFK was, but what what it showed us is you can make an action film from a dialogue film. You know, anything can hit that hard, and you can find a way to kind of get the pulse pounding and kind of treat it in this, you know, vital sort of way. But mostly it was like, well, look, you go in with optimism, and you have your own private fears about what's going to happen at the box office. You also have your pie in the sky, you know, if everything went incredibly, what if everybody liked the movie and it did well? But we never envisaged anything like the success of the film in our wildest dreams. I mean, it's crazy. And, you know, it's black and white, it's 3 hours long, and it's R-rated. So, no, it's worldwide. It's the second highest R-rated film of all time, which is just bizarre. Like,
It's
It turns out people all over the world are scared of nukes.
yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. And if they weren't before enough,
And they want to process that.
Yeah, it's interesting you say it's an action movie with dialogue, because there are so many other mini genres like buried in it too. Even I think of the science stuff, all the, you know, the nuclear fission and all that stuff, almost as like a horror movie. Like he's haunted by the science that he can't understand, and like to actually apply genre tropes to that is kind of it's really beautiful. Some of my favorite stuff.
oh, thank you.
Yeah,
You're very much in the editing rhythms. I'm a huge Adrian Lyne fan. I love Jacob's Ladder. I love the editing rhythms of that, where you're seeing things, but you don't. It's so quick, you don't quite know what you're seeing. And I felt that when we researched what it was like to be Oppenheimer and to be any of these physicists really wrestling with this whole new way of looking at the world, it was quite frightening. It was quite alienating for them. And the idea, you know, is that Niels Bohr sort of shows him a path where he can kind of, it becomes a superpower in a way. It's a sort of thing that once he figures out how to use it, but, you know, they were literally, you know, looking into dull matter and seeing energy, seeing that everything's made of energy waves. It completely transforms everything. And the science visualizations was one of the most fun parts of the process. So Andrew Jackson, my visual effects supervisor, he was the first person I showed the script to after Emma, because I knew that it was going to take a long time to figure out how to do all this stuff and do it without CG and have it fit the tone of the rest of the film. And when I went to the IAS in Princeton, the real place where he was the director, we wound up shooting there, but I met the then director of it, the person who had Oppenheimer's job. He's a great physicist called Robert Dygroff, and I sat in Oppenheimer's garden, which is where he was living, and talked to him about quantum physics, talked to him about what we're trying to do, and he said this thing that was absolutely terrifying to me, because he said, well, the thing that scientists at the time found alienating is you can no longer visualize the atom. And of course, as a filmmaker, you hear that. You're like, well, but that's my whole job. That's the whole, what do you mean you can't visualize the atom? And he was very serious. And you know, if you look into the period, if you look into it, it was like that was the thing, is scientists were suddenly being asked to have to imagine the world in a completely different way with completely different things. And so spoke for a long time, for a couple hours, I sat there and picked his brain and eventually said, okay, well, what do we have in the medium that you can use expressively? And it sort of came down to editing, really. It's like Eisenstein, you know, put it as shot A plus shot B gives you thought C. And so we get that we can do. Scientists don't have that ability. So we can look at representations of particles and waves, editorially combine them so that you're putting the two ideas together, which is a lot of what they were wrestling with. And so a lot of that thought and those experiments, that went on for sort of months and months, but it was something, it's one of the most sort of pure creative and cinematic processes that I've got to be involved with in my filmmaking, and I really, really enjoyed that aspect of it.
So your next movie is just all montage miniatures?
All from outtakes
Yeah.
of this.
I would watch
many hours.
I would watch 2 hours of that, yeah.
Well, there were days where we would sit at like City Walk, the IMAX there, which is one of the last film projectors, and we'd watch our dailies. And I remember inviting Ludwig Göransson, who did incredible music on the film, and wonderful composer.
So good.
But I called Ludwig and I said, because he was starting to do experiments for it, I said, well, we've got some of our tests of some of this quantum stuff. you want to come and take a look? And he was like, absolutely, great. And so sat there, and the projector fired up, and I suddenly realized that, I mean, we sat there for a couple hours looking at sort of weird blue dots kind of flying around or whatever. But, you know, he was inspired, so it was,
People would definitely pay for that
Yeah,
experience.
you could do this. Universal could release the quantum cut. I would go.
I want to ask one question since we're talking about the science and the tech. I want to ask sort of about your personal relationship with technology, just because so much of your work is really meditating on the good and the bad, and just the sort of the as he was saying, the paradoxical quality of technology, and like even from the Prestige, you know, you're blurring magic and science, and Interstellar, obviously, Batman, you were kind of prescient and like describing a version of like surveillance through our cell phones, you know, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Like you've kind of just always had like a finger on the pulse of that, and now doing Oppenheimer, obviously one of the biggest myths of technology humans have ever interacted with. Where do you think we're going? This is like, I mean, I know this is like a very big, just because clearly you think so much about this, and obviously our industry is very preoccupied with what is happening right now.
Well, I've been asked a lot of questions about AI in the last few months, because right as the film was coming out was when, you know, ChatGPT and Sam Altman and everything was sort of gaining a lot of traction in journalistic circles, because guess what? As soon as AI could write a news article, it was a huge problem for journalists. And so suddenly things that people have been talking about for many years and trying to warn us about or whatever, suddenly it became the forefront of the media concern. I was asked about, you know, talk to some of the leading minds in AI, and a lot of them were referring to this as their Oppenheimer moment. And they're looking to Oppenheimer's story for some kind of guidance or clarity on the dangers of new technology going out in the world and unintended consequences. And I don't think seeing this film helped them in the slightest. And you know, but I take comfort in the fact that they're worrying about that and thinking about that. I think sometimes they're grandstanding in a good old-fashioned sales pitch of like, here's my product, and by the way, it's so dangerous. You know, they're certainly making a lot of money doing that. As far as the specific dangers and where do I think we're going, I mean, I think the reality is the term AI is unhelpful. It's a blanket term. You're seeing it bandied around every different type of technology, a lot of them very unrelated to dangers of machine learning, all the rest. Our industry, our union as DGA members had certain concerns about it addressed in the labor negotiation very, very carefully. The WGA got excellent language in their agreement. The writers have real concerns with it, rightly so. SAG just voted through their contract. Very glad to see they ratified it. So we're all back to work, and that's great. And they, you know, they have negotiating points and protections start there. But the problem is the phrase that gets bandied around all the time is guardrails. But the truth is, it's a nice sounding phrase, but until you really know what's going to be done with this technology, it's difficult to legislate. And that, you know, that's one of the challenges we all face. But because the term AI is used so broadly, I think if you look at the work of somebody like Roger Penrose, I don't know if you're familiar with the Penrose steps, as famously portrayed in Inception. One moment.
The impossible stairs.
Stolen from
exactly. Yeah, I remember that.
Escher and Penrose. Penrose is a mathematician, but he'll point out there are a lot of areas of mathematics that physicists and mathematicians understand. Infinity is not one simple concept. There are bounded infinities. There are different types of infinities. Within all of these higher mathematics, higher scale things, there are paradoxes that human beings effortlessly navigate that machines can't. And I have yet to hear from anybody working in AI exactly how those fundamentals are going to be truly leapt over. So, you know, how do you teach an AI to distinguish between left and right, for example? No one has an answer for that. And for us, that's pretty simple. So I take great reassurance in that, and I think that There are absolutely dangers within it, and I think people are very right to be making noise about it and calling for regulation, and they should be regulating rather than succumbing to the Silicon Valley playbook of please regulate us. Oh, but by the way, this is too complicated for you to understand. We saw that for years and years with other technologies. We're seeing it now with AI. I'm hoping that people are going to demand more regulation than that and make it incumbent on the companies to figure out how to use it. But I personally am actually very optimistic about how AI tools and machine learning are going to help us in all kinds of ways. And I think that human creativity and human ingenuity is something that nobody understands wonderfully.
What's the quote at the beginning of the movie that he steals fire from the gods and is picked apart?
Yes, I mean chained to. I didn't put the whole thing in, but
Yeah.
Prometheus was chained to a rock and his liver pecked out and regrew every day.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
I'm very pessimistic about AI, and I want to peck at Sam Altman for the rest of my short life. But
yes, you
once
must
he
be-
releases his bomb on
well,
me.
there's definitely the feeling of the non-profit board getting rid of him and then being forced by the investors to bring him back. In a movie, that's definitely the moment the world ends. Yes, I mean that's when the ship sailed. But
I'm going to Strauss him. Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. But I'm more optimistic than that. I mean,
That's
look,
good.
you asked me what my pitch was for Oppenheimer. I don't really have an answer for you. I can tell you that no one can write an AI algorithm that will tell Universal they should have made that film. It's, and I don't know why and I don't know what, but I have faith in that we're all creative individuals and we offer something to the world and that's valuable. I don't think it's going to be replaced.
I love human beings. Speaking of human beings, you've worked with Cillian many times,
Yeah.
like 5 or 6 times, and it's so cool to see that relationship grow into like his moment. I'm just curious what he's been like to work with over the years. What's y'all's relationship like that kind of led to this? Is he a certain kind of actor that like that you're like, yes, I like he gets me? Or
I met Cillian Murphy. I saw a picture of him in the newspaper when he was starring in Danny Boyle's film 28 Days Later, and it hadn't come out yet. And I was trying to write the script for Batman Begins, and I was reading the San Francisco Chronicle, saw a picture of him, and he was so striking. And I was looking for Batman. I was like, okay, we need to cast Batman. We were putting screen tests together. So more or less off that, I watched 28 Days Later. I was like, okay. When we did our screen test, we screen tested about 5 actors, and Cillian flew into town, and I met him, and he walked in. I met him at a restaurant, had dinner the night before the screen test, and he walked in, and I was like, this really isn't Batman. It just did not feel like Batman. Sat down and started talking to him, and we absolutely creatively connected immediately. And I thought, you know what? We're going to go ahead. We're going to test him. And I think, secretly I was like, if it's a horrible embarrassment, I don't have to show it to the studio or whatever, whatever. But we did 35 mil, had a set, everything. These were proper like old school, screen tests, like from the 1930s or something. And he started acting as Bruce Wayne, and the whole crew just sort of started paying attention in a way that I've almost never seen on set ever. And I sort of called the executives down to come and watch the rest of his screen test as he was shooting it, and because you could feel this absolutely remarkable presence. And he wasn't right for Batman, but the studio, off the basis of the test, when we then screened it for him, they let me cast him as Scarecrow, and that was the first time they'd ever, if you think about who had played the villains in those films, it was Jack Nicholson, it was Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jim Carrey. They let this complete unknown come in and take on, this big part because everyone was so blown away by his talent. And so I've worked with him whenever I can since then. He's a purely instinctive actor. There's no obvious sort of complicated process. We talk about things or whatever. He loses himself in the moment. And when I first started working with him, to the extent that you know, if there's a handheld camera there and the actor's running, he'll just kind of, you know, do that to see the actor behind it. Like he's just not thinking about what, you know, what he's supposed to be doing. He's just in the moment, and therefore in the old days couldn't hit a mark to save his life because he would just, we'd put a sandbag down, he'd just step over it, you know, because he's just in it and he's just thinking. And then years and years go by, and those kind of aspects of his technique got incredibly buttoned up, and he's a very precise actor.
Yeah, that's important for IMAX.
It's very important for IMAX, but he's exactly. But he's never lost that. He's never lost that ability to just completely lose himself in the moment and in the character he's doing. And so I mean, on Dunkirk, I called him up. You know, I sent him the script. I said, I need you to play this. It was referred to in the script as a shivering soldier. There were no indications of character, nothing. And I'm like, he called me, and I could tell, you know, he's something was up. He's like, oh, I like the script or whatever. And I said, well, what is it? He said, well, can I play a Spitfire pilot, you know, please, or something? Or I was like, no, I need you on the boat, and the character's underwritten. And that's the experiment of that screenplay. We're going to get out there on that boat with you and Mark Rylance and Barry Keoghan and Tom Glencarney, and we're going to find it. You're going to help me do that. And he sort of reluctantly agreed, but he agreed. He turned up, and we went out to sea. And I'd be like, okay, can you just dive in the water over there and swim to that, you know? And he was just shivering and in it in that way that, you know, only somebody very committed, a great friend could be. And the mark of him as an actor in that film is at the end when he's sort of, we're struggling with his resolution of character, and the boat gets strafed by a plane. And when we were rehearsing, because we rehearsed as we went out to sea for an hour, he helped me figure it out. He's like, okay, if I react with, you know, PTSD, if that sort of triggers me, and then Mark has to come over and takes me in, and we sort of shoot that from the side. And he created the most wonderful moment for Mark Rylance's character. Mm-hmm. And that, you know, that's the beauty of him. He's just thinking about the whole thing. And so coming to Oppenheimer with him, I just felt so excited to be able, well, first you just be able to call him up and say, I'm sending you a script, and, you know, this is the big one. This is the big part for you, you know, and then to get there on set and just be able to frankly take his talent for granted, which is, as you know, for a director is a huge gift, because you're worrying about so many other things. To have somebody at the center of it who's so professional and so natural and committed to it, and simple in his process. And right towards the end of shooting, it was Robert Downey Jr.'s last day, and he took me aside. Robert took me aside, and he's like, do you have any idea what this guy's doing for you? You know, and he's exhausted, by the way, and he, you know, and I listened, and I said to Robert, yeah, he'll be fine. And he was. But but I took his point. You know, he killed it. And in all honesty, it wasn't until Jen Lame was putting the pieces together and we were really seeing the whole thing. That's when I really got to see what he'd done. And it was so far beyond what I'd hoped, and so far beyond what I thought I was getting while we were shooting. I was very happy with what he was doing, but I didn't realize that he was going to give a performance of zero vanity, playing a very vain character, but zero vanity. There's never a moment. One filmmaker I showed it to early said to me, yeah, there's never that moment where you see him realize what a great part it is. You know, and I thought, that's exactly right. It's just total commitment, you know, and I'm just so thrilled with what he did, and it was after 20 years of working together, it was just a wonderful culmination of them.
He's incredible in the film. Just and you're right, he's in almost every scene. It's absolutely wild. Yeah. We are getting the wrap up signal, so.
Do I get the last one?
You have one last question.
Okay, I just like to ask people, like, is there anyone in the cast or crew that, like, doesn't get top billing, doesn't get talked about in the press, that, like, is like an MVP of sorts? Like,
well, this being a DGA crowd, I mean, I have to talk about Nilo Otero, my first AD of many years.
Cool.
So none of you have met him then. But no, Nilo's a legend. I've been working with him since The Dark Knight, and there's so much that goes into a complex production like this with a massive cast. He and his team making sure everybody's where they need to be, when they need to be, doing the Trinity test at night in the desert, doing that safely, knowing where everybody is, the organizational challenges of that, the leadership that's required from the AD department in terms of keeping everybody focused and safe and working efficiently with all of that. And yet nobody ever talks about ADs.
Yeah.
It's as if, I remember getting a call asking about Nilo once about, but I hear you like to run your own sets, or you like to, and I said, well, on the last film, we did a day with 11,000 extras. Do you think I had anything to do with that? Like, that's not, I was there puzzling about where to put the camera and, really uncomfortable in front of massive crowds. And Nilo's there entertaining and keeping everybody going, hour after hour. And I think, the first ADs in particular, but the way that they, the discipline with which they manage their whole teams. Thank you for the question, because it's nice to be able to talk about that, particularly with this audience and that setting, because it doesn't get talked about enough. But it's such a huge part of any large-scale film, any film really. But a large-scale film in particular, there's so much that even the most sort of controlling director, you need this incredible team bringing all this stuff to the floor.
Yeah, especially with a controlling director, then you need someone keeping everybody
Exactly.
happy, preventing them from quitting and stuff.
Exactly.
ADs
or
are
allowing them to quit, but it's the right people, yeah.
Right, and find someone new.
They should go.
Yeah.
Exactly.
ADs,
Seamless, moving straight
they're
on.
lifesavers. Yeah, we would not be up here if we had.
Christopher Nolan, everyone, thank you so much for coming and answering our questions. Thank you, DJ. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.